And we're going. Let me see if, all right, let's see here. Let me make sure I'm actually here and this is actually real. We'll go to Brent, okay, my friend, this is Dr. Brent Turvey. I'm here with Paul Ciolino, one of my oldest friends, the old friend, and we've been friends for a long time. And we're just talking about not having gold status. Somebody doesn't have gold status and they're not happy.
I got gold status on American, my friend, okay?
Well, American Airlines, that's nice. That's good. American Airlines, I hear they're nice.
Partner with Alaskan, I might add.
Oh no, actually, about 6 months ago they dumped it. As soon as Alaska bought Virgin, Alaska and American stopped being partners. So we don't
longer know that.
Yeah, I found out 2 months ago. I'm very upset. This is by the way a prelude to probably the whitest conversation of privilege we're going to have, because we're bitching about gold status and not having shared partner miles.
I'm all about white privilege, my friend. It took me a long time to get any or even figure out what it was.
I only just found out what it was. So do me a favor, Paul, turn down your volume a little bit so I don't get any feedback, all right? Just turn it down a little. We'll be okay. All right, so we're recording this for posterity, but I want to broadcast live on Facebook because I want everybody to see what we're talking about. I think it's an important subject. Today we're going to talk about law enforcement liability and holding law enforcement accountable. And I think the best way to start this out is what Paul and I were talking about before we started rolling, and that is it's a very dangerous world. And every morning, I think Paul and I do the same thing. We both get on the internet, we both look at our news feed and see what's going on in the world. And this morning, there was a particularly terrible case you were talking about, right? The young girl who was abducted.
Yeah, we're talking about a young African-American girl in Texas, a delivery driver for Domino's. She's abducted after work, 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
And she's walking home with her mom.
Yep, and she's later found dead. I mean, senseless, brutal, stupid murder.
Oh, yeah, this is several, yeah. It is. It's extremely violent, and she ticks all the boxes, right? I mean, how old is she?
She's a young girl. I only saw a picture, so I'm guessing under 25.
Right, but then on top of that, she's African American. And the neighborhood. There's a bunch of things that have to occur for a crime to occur. You have to have that routine activities theory stuff going on, and that is one. You got to have the suitable target. You got to have the motivated offender, and you got to have the absence of a capable guardian. And when you've got someone who's a minority, someone who's in what we call a vulnerable status or a protected status, that's somebody who they're protected and vulnerable precisely because of all the dangers that exist because of who they are, right?
Well, listen, there's a 16-year-old girl in Chicago the other night, rock star kid, right? Hispanic girl, walking home from school. She gets shot in the head at 7:30 in the evening. Yeah,
no kidding. Oh, God. I saw that. That's fucking terrible. So the thing is, it is a dangerous world. It is very violent. It's violent everywhere. It's violent in the United States. It's violent in the other parts of the world. I don't think there's any place left where violence has not crept in. One of the things that I talk about living where I live in Sitka is that we compare it and contrast it with Chicago all the time, you and I do. And the difference is that we don't have a prison here. We have a jail, but we don't have a prison, which means that we send all of anybody who gets arrested here for doing bad things, whether it's drugs or domestic violence or sexual assault. And that happens on a fairly regular basis. These people get arrested and then they get sent to Juneau, which is we're on an island. We send them off to the mainland to Juneau. They go to Lemon Creek, which is the prison there. And then when they get let out, they don't have any money. They don't have anything. So they wind up in Juneau.
Yes, they stay there on the island, right?
I understand Chicago has not figured out how to do that, right?
No, we got prisons everywhere. In the state of Illinois, we have over 35 prisons, I believe.
Right.
That's state prisons. Okay, now we have 102 counties.
Right.
Almost every county has their own jail.
Oh, exactly right. And not only that, but when they get out, it's not like there's things keeping them. When they get out, that they don't have any money. It's not like they've learned any skills. They've not become better people.
Oh, no, they get out broke and desperate.
What?
They get out broke and desperate.
That is the best way to put it. They get out broke and desperate. That's an excellent descriptor. So you create this population who are not invested in society, who have no interest in protecting it. What they have is their basic needs not being met. They get out and they're going to repeat probably doing bad things. They're going to have to repeat to get food and shelter for the most part. That's it. And this is I want to say that this is a very important thing, right on the issue of it being a very bad and scary and dangerous world. And I really appreciate you bringing up food and shelter. One of my favorite things about you, Paul, is that you understand what it's like. You're like me. You understand what it's like to be poor. There are a lot of, I'm just going to say it this way, a kind way. There are a lot of fucking assholes out there who do not understand what it means to be poor. You know what I mean? Right. I was raised very poor. Tell me how you were raised. You were raised wealthy, right?
I was raised, listen, we were raised about 2 paychecks away from being in big trouble.
Well, you had paychecks? So that's nice. You must be nice.
My dad always worked, all right? But he was a salesman, so if he wasn't selling, there was no money. There was no cushion.
That's right.
Right? So many times my parents would go without really eating, so maybe me and my pals could eat if they were around.
Yeah, getting 1 or 2 meals a day was a big deal, right?
Well, listen, it was basically 1 meal a day and a bologna sandwich at lunchtime in school.
I ate a lot of butter sandwiches, my friend. When I was growing up, my parents, they had nothing. My mom was a nurse, but back then it didn't pay very well. And my father, he was an electrician, but for the last year and a half of his life, he had cancer. So he wasn't working at all. And it was horrible.
Right. And listen, I have a high school friend right now that's basically homeless. He's disabled. We're the same age. Yeah. He's on Facebook bitching and carrying on every day about nowhere to live. Social Security, what little money he gets for Social Security from being disabled, they're taking it away because he's in some kind of rehab center. Yep. So he's in this warped sense of reality where he can't leave because he's got no money, and Social Security's taking his money away because he's in rehab.
No, that's
not rehab for drugs, rehab for some physical disability.
No, I get it. Yeah, there's all kinds of rehab.
But let's face it, he's probably generally an asshole because he's got kids and they're ignoring him. So there's I'm sure a backstory. But the point is, he has zero resources.
And this is the point. If someone doesn't have resources, basic things like food, shelter, clothing, they can't function in society like you and I can. They are not, and they're going to be a danger. They're going to create a risk. They're going to be a danger, and they're going to be capable of doing desperate and terrible things. And that's why
drug abuse or mental health issues, or just name it, a variety of issues.
Well, using cheap access to drugs and alcohol they can get, so that they can escape their fucking miserable existence. And that's
sure, they're self-medicated.
Yeah. They self-medicate themselves into oblivion. Now, that's not an excuse. I'm not talking about excuses. I'm not talking about responsibility. I'm talking about reality. I don't live in this fantasy world where where everybody can do whatever they want. They can't. People can barely move from one city to the next. Tell me about that. Let's talk about that. The ability to move, to get out of your situation. People, remember Hurricane Katrina? People were like, well, why didn't they just leave? Why didn't the people who died, why didn't they just leave? I laughed so hard. I'm thinking, what rich white asshole said that?
Well, the government was moving everybody out because of Baton Rouge, which is a good 2 hours north of New Orleans and mainland, right? Their population increased by 35% after Katrina.
No, exactly.
And it was basically all the assholes that were in New Orleans were now in Baton Rouge committing crimes, or Houston. Right.
But if you don't have the money or the resources, you can't even get a tank of gas and move to another area.
Moving is an expensive proposition unless you're moving with the clothes on your back.
That's right.
That's right. Yeah, but if you got stuff, you got a couch and a bed and a dresser and the big screen TV. Now we're getting into, I got to have something to move all that stuff with.
And let's not even forget about the animals. People left their animals behind very often.
Well, if you can't feed yourself, probably got no business having an animal, okay? Yeah. Because animals are not cheap.
No, they are not. Oh,
they're
not cheap.
Yeah, the government's going to tax them and make you license them and require certain medical things happen every year, and you got to feed them and house them and bathe them, and it's like having a child almost.
That's right. So when you have this population of people who are this desperate and with this much without resources and this much without even agency, it creates a world that is very dangerous. It creates a world where there is, and then you add on top of that another layer of people who are exploiting those people. So I see this cyclical pattern that I think has to be broken before we can even address these problems. But first, we have to admit we have that problem. So
Well, we have that problem. We've always had that problem in this country in 350 years. It's just magnified because now instead of a couple million people running around, we got 350 million to deal with.
That's right.
So it's not going to go away. That's the way the world works.
Absolutely. So we add in this. This is the next layer is we have law enforcement. And law enforcement is supposed to be there to help, supposed to be there to keep the peace. If you want to be a warrior, if you want to go out and kill people, go in the military. The military, that's the warriors. That's the people who with the guns were said to be the broadsword, right?
Well, in theory, yes.
Yeah, in theory, law enforcement is supposed to be the people who are protecting citizens and making sure that their rights are protected, making sure their property is protected, making sure that when a law enforcement officer gets added to a scenario, that things become safer, things become better. That is supposed to be the goal. Unfortunately, as you and I both know, that is also not the world we live in. So today, our colleague Dr. Crowder posted a article that's been posted many times in the last couple of weeks, and that is an article about how there are law enforcement officers who are killed and they don't get the respect and attention they deserve. But more importantly, they also it adds to the notion that it's a very dangerous profession and people don't want to join it anymore. There is this notion, and it's being floated constantly by the law enforcement community, that law enforcement's a dangerous profession. The media focuses on the wrong things, and therefore people don't want to join. People don't want to join. The notion being, again, law enforcement. People don't want to join law enforcement because it's dangerous and because the media portrays them in a negative light. Tell me your thoughts about that, because I have some very specific thoughts about that.
Well, I got to tell you, for the most part, that's nonsense. Okay, most police departments have lists that are long and longer. Okay, with 500, 1,000. For instance, the Chicago Police Department held a test last year, and 30,000 people showed up. 30,000.
Yep.
Now, there's a prerequisite before you can join the police department, right? And everybody knows the prerequisite. So we don't have unqualified candidates for the most part. These are qualified people to sit and take the test.
Yes.
I.e., no criminal record and a high school diploma or a GED.
And no drugs and no lying on your application.
Well, listen, and then they weed out a bunch of people who do lie and who do use drugs and that sort of thing. So, but the fact is, every time they have a test, they have 30, 40, 50,000 people show up to take it. Okay?
That's in Chicago, right?
Yes. And any big city police department, county sheriff's department of any size, always has a long list of potential hirees.
Right.
All right. So this whole thing is nobody wants to be a cop is bullshit unless it's a cop in a place where they're paying $13 an hour and they have no benefits and you're driving your own car around maybe. Yeah, well, nobody wants that job.
Yeah, no, this is a really good point because you've brought up an important point. Not all law enforcement jobs are equal. They don't all pay the same. They don't all have the same benefits. Most importantly, I think they don't all have all the same reputation or leadership, right? If your agency pays poorly, has bad leadership, has a bad reputation in the community, yeah, you're not going to have a lot of qualified applicants coming at you. That's just a fact. And if you're not seeking to change that reputation, if you're not seeking to be a better part of the community, qualified people of character are not going to want to be there. They're not going to want to be part of your agency. And I think that gets missed a lot.
I think the police unions are largely responsible for this whole publicity-driven thing about nobody wants to be a cop. It's too dangerous. There's too many rules.
Right, that's the other one.
You're going to be in too much trouble, and you're going to jeopardize your freedom and your life and your job. And ergo, they're doing other things. Okay.
Here's the thing: how many cops do you know? I know so many cops. Most of them do not have lawsuits against them. Most of them don't ever draw their weapon. And that's because most of them are not interested in doing things that violate their policy, right?
Listen, every segment of society, the police are no different than any other industry, okay? There are certain assholes and shitheads that get past the process, and they get a badge and a gun.
Yep.
Now, generally, and I've been doing civil rights work against the police forever, we generally run into the same bad actors over and over and over again. Yep. Most of them, police officers who get in trouble, have a tendency to get in trouble all the time. They're problem children.
That's
they
right.
Don't do enough to get fired.
The majority of it's the repeat offenders, right? It's just like regular crime. The repeat offenders are the frequent flyers, basically. The frequent flyers are the ones that are the problem.
So, for instance, if I get a shooting case involving the police and a family's alleging their loved one was gunned down unfairly, not minding his own business, and the police shot him, or they were heavy-handed when arrested and shot him.
Right.
Generally speaking, we know two things happen. The officer who's pulled the trigger, more often than not, has probably been involved in similar incidents in the past.
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah. And if that happens, that's a red flag for us, because that means he doesn't have any problem shooting you, given any sort of resistance and or no cameras running or that sort of thing, the little chance of being caught, and or under the strictest guidelines, and they're very lenient towards the police, i.e., if I feel my life is in danger, or those are my colleagues, or somebody in the public, I can shoot you.
Well, now, here's the interesting, on that note, there was just a police officer who was tagged. He just shot somebody again in an officer-involved shooting, and he shot somebody like 6 months prior. This goes, again, back to your notion of it's the same guys over and over again. And that's one of the other reasons I found that the law enforcement agencies work so hard to conceal the jackets of these guys. They don't want you to know which ones are the good ones or the bad ones, because they can't fire the bad ones, the unions, right?
Constant fight to find out what people's records are, their internal records, what's going on. And I didn't finish my thought. And then we get the officer who's been on the job 7, 8, 9, 10 years, has no previous complaints for excessive force. This is first involved shooting. Generally, it leads me to believe it's probably a good shooting, right? It's in all likelihood, unless the guy's been assigned to a desk for 9 years and he's been out on the street for 2 weeks, very unlikely. And it was assigned to a desk because they were worried about him being in the street, right? So they kept him out of the street as long as they could. Right. But for whatever reason, the point is, history is a great predictor of what's going on currently.
History is the only reliable predictor of future behavior. That's just the way it is, right?
No. Yeah, it's a problem, and they don't want you to know who's got a bad record.
No.
And of course, it's like lawyers. Let's look at lawyers. So in Illinois, a lawyer can have 60 complaints against him for all kinds of misconduct. But unless the Bar Association took aggressive level finding him to be at fault at some point, which is almost impossible for that to happen, but you will never hear about those prior violations. Under law, you can't have access to them, which is ridiculous. Now,
I don't. And there are other states where you have sunshine laws where you absolutely have total and complete access. That's the kind of stuff I love. I wish there was more of that.
Here's my feeling on that. If a agency is taking taxpayer money, everything should be an open book.
Well, let's back up now. This is a red flag issue for a lot of people. Taxpayer money and this, that, and the other. Let's break it down for people who might not be might understand how it works. How it works is this: you and I are citizens of the United States. We pay taxes. These taxes are then used to create and form government agencies, which are then required to provide government services in fulfillment of constitutional obligations or legal obligations that a community sets up. These are not entitlements. These are not things. This is not free money. This is not anything. This is the police, the fire, the roads, electrical, all this stuff, this infrastructure that we want. All this stuff is supposed to flow steadily from our taxes. Libraries, schools, that kind of stuff. You can add it. You can discuss other things about what you want to be in there, but those basic requirements, those basic needs, those exist not as an entitlement, but as a requirement of the justice system to fulfill the constitutional obligations of the government. It's very important to understand that. No, we're not asking for or suggesting that there's something more that's required, right? Tell me about that just a little bit.
We're not asking for an officer's home address, the name of his children, where did he go to school, his spouse's name, what she does. No, we want to know what's going on in his professional or her professional life.
That's right.
We want to know where they've been trained, who trained them, how long ago the training was, et cetera. Those are the things we're interested in. If there's been citizen complaints.
The questions that we get asked on a regular basis and are forced to answer under oath all the time, inclusive of our personal stuff, right? We get asked that all the time. So
nothing's off base when we're being questioned. However, start questioning a law enforcement official There's all kinds of things they're going to call off base.
Yeah, I find that to be very dishonest. Whenever I see that going on, it makes me immediately suspicious of the agency and the officer. Like everybody in the room is hiding something that needs to be exposed immediately. Now, maybe you're going to argue, well, it's just that's personal. You don't get. Okay, fine. If it's personal for you, then it's personal for everybody. Stop asking other people those questions. Except that it's relevant. Except that it does matter. We need to know if, for example, the police officer, the detective in charge of the case, is banging the judge. We need to know. I'm afraid. Like just
it would be nice to know. It would be very nice to know that.
It would be nice to know who's married in the courtroom and who's not. It would be nice to know who's dating and who's not, right? And you find these things out after the fact. I want to know, for example, if the judge is texting any of the jurors. That's nice to know. I want to know if the defense, if the police officer is sleeping with any of the key witnesses, or if the prosecutor is holding charges back on someone else while they're testifying. These are things that the defense needs to know, or that the community needs to know, I would think. Tell me about that.
Oh, listen, I can't tell you how many times we've found detectives involved with complaining and or serious witnesses in a case, especially if it involves narcotics. I can't tell you the number, or prostitution.
Narcotics, exactly.
Some men consider this a benefit of the job, that they can have relationships with these women.
Right, for free. They go in and they want to exploit them for free. They go in and they hold charges over them, and they want freebies from these. And it's
right. They become informants, right?
But that's exactly how they become informants. They want a protected class that they can keep their thumb on, that they can control, which is really that breaks my heart, because no human being should be subordinate to another human being. That's not how. I don't think that's how it should work. I know that's pie in the eye liberal bullshit. I know you're here. I know what you're thinking, but at the same time,
that's why we have sexual harassment laws. Except sexual harassment laws usually don't extend to detective informant status.
Yeah, isn't that weird? You would think.
Yeah.
And why are there so many?
It's like a protected class of citizens.
And not only that, why are there so many police agencies fighting for the right to lawfully sleep with prostitutes in vice operations? Why do so many police agencies want this? I'm very curious.
Well, listen, it's not good policy, not a good idea. It's immoral, unethical, and illegal, I might add.
And coercive and exploitative, and hurts the person. I mean, who's being hurt in that situation? Not the cop.
Right.
It's very frustrating.
You and I, fortunately, don't deal with a lot of vice-related stuff. We deal with more serious crimes, and I had a detective in Chicago who was sleeping with all his witnesses, and they were all involved in murder cases. He was a Hispanic officer who would get a Hispanic female drug addict or someone of that ilk and turn them into an informant and make them testify to things they did not see or know about. That's who would be the star witness. Now, when it starts falling apart 20 years later, we find out there's a sexual relationship with many of these women.
Right.
And, of course, this day, that officer is receiving about $100,000 a year or more in pension and is not under in any trouble, although he's taken the Fifth Amendment in a number of civil cases now.
Of course. That breaks my heart, because here's the thing. A lot of people go into sex work not by choice, obviously. People are being trafficked, and it's not by choice. Even the ones that go in by choice, if they get stuck in there for some financial reason, or for some reason relating to geography, or some reason related to finances, they can't get out. And they're stuck. And then you have a law enforcement officer who comes along who's supposed to be somebody who's helpful. And instead of helping them, they keep them in that situation explicitly to exploit them. And I can't fathom why another person would do that to another person, but I see it every day. And it's
we know that happens. And listen, it's all part of the criminal justice game. And
right.
We shouldn't say this on an open forum like this, because we'll probably live to regret it or have it come back at us at a later date. But the fact is, there's two different sets of rules. All right. Yeah. There's a set of rules for those in authority, and a set of rules for the rest of us.
That's right. I
have break them pretty silly willy. We are not allowed to break them. Well, if we get caught breaking them, we'll get punished.
Well, and not just that. It's a function, I believe, and law enforcement agencies will even explicitly say this. It's a function of whether or not the agency feels how much work it's going to have to put into making the case. If it can make an easy case against somebody, they'll make it. But if that person has the resources to fight the case, they won't. If they have the resources to fight back, they might not, unless it's an exceptional case, high profile, and somebody's got a hard on for the target and they go after
it. Right. And money is a great equalizer in the criminal justice system, but it's not. You and I have a client who spent in excess of $10 million, and 2 people are sitting in prison wrongfully convicted after she spent that money.
That's a fact. That is
well,
a fact.
1.5, let's say, okay? But the fact is they had all the resources in the world, but they had the wrong resources. They had resources that took advantage of them because they were unfamiliar on how the criminal justice system functions and operates.
And that's another thing. So just like, I really appreciate you bringing the symmetry into place, Paul. You're always really good at this because I get lost sometimes. Because I get angry, let's be honest. The symmetry is that you have law enforcement is not equal. They're not equally funded. They're not equally paid. They're not equally educated. Neither are attorneys. If you do not have the right attorney for the right job, then you are absolutely, no matter how much money you spend, going to get screwed.
Well, it's even worse than that because you have to have the right attorney at the right point in their career. Yes. You could get one who's vastly well experienced, but is now on the downside of their career or has developed a drug or alcohol or gambling issue in their life. And their guy really isn't on the ball. They're taking your money. They're not doing what they would have done 10, 15 years previously. They're just taking your money, going through the motions, making it look good.
Yes,
so not only do you have to pick someone who's really good, you got to pick someone who's really in their prime and willing to fight the good fight for you.
In the right place in their career. This is absolutely true. I could not be, it is, I can count on one hand. Tell me in your hand, you've got maybe a list of attorneys you have if you need them. I can count maybe 4 that I would call, and it would be for different.
35 years in this business, there's 2 or 3 I would call. And maybe 10 years ago, there was probably 5 or 6. And people would be surprised who I would call today. But it's only because of the amount of knowledge I have about their personal habits, their practice, their success record, and what they're up to currently right now.
And that leads us to our subject today, which is how do you hold, if you have a bad actor in law enforcement who has violated the law, who has violated the Constitution, who has violated human rights, violated policy and protocol, you have to have a really good attorney to bring this to light. It can't just be a thing that happens and all of a sudden the gates open and everything goes exactly right. The truth comes out and sets you free. That does not happen. You have to have, if you don't have the right attorney who's properly experienced, properly educated, properly motivated, giving him the right information, they will not be able to function. They will not be able to do any of that. And they also on top of that, they got to know the law.
Well, and last but most importantly, they have to be well funded. And let's say you're a broke guy suing the police for some really outrageous. Let's say you're in police custody and you get beat up and you become a quadriplegic, okay?
Yeah.
For example.
Right in your spine happens.
Happens a lot in custody. A lot of in-custody deaths, broken necks, things of that nature. The most famous one happened in Baltimore in the back of a paddy wagon.
The guy was cuffed.
Yeah.
Now you have to have a lawyer. Arrived dead.
Now you have to have an attorney. You would have no money. Your broke ass is laying in a rehab institute in a county hospital. You're lucky to get ice chips on your lips every 8 hours, okay? Never mind hire a good civil rights attorney. So now you got to find someone who's not only smart and good at going after the police, but rich, because it's going to cost that attorney several $100,000 to hire experts, to depose them, to hire investigators, to hire police practice experts, etc., over the course of the next 4, 5, 6 years to prove your case against that county, city, and agency.
You got to be you as a plaintiff. You as a plaintiff have to be emotionally capable of doing it as well. I can't tell you the number of people who think it's going to be easy, or they get sort of we even have law enforcement clients who come to us to sue their agencies for different things, for different injustices, and they have the same problem. They get fucking fatigued. Emotionally fatigued.
Oh, well, they're going to wear you out. They're going to throw lawyers and money at you, and they're going to do everything. The judge is going to help them do everything to get the case dismissed for not crossing the T's and dotting the I's, or you missed a time limit.
And by the way, let's also talk about the isolation aspect. You're going to lose all your friends.
Well, you won't have.
You go into lawsuit mode.
You're going to run away.
You're going to lose every person who you thought was your friend. You're going to find. You're going to find out exactly who your real friends are.
Your friends don't want to hear this shit nonstop for the next 5-6 years. They're uninterested. It doesn't affect them, and they get tired of you bemoaning the fact that your life has been destroyed by some person or agency, and they really don't want to deal with your stuff. That's what it boils down.
Unless you're best friends, like some people, with Brent Turvey, who just is a masochist.
Right. It enjoys your pain. That's what it is.
Not only wants you to hear it, but actually gets nourishment from your suffering.
Yeah, finds great humor in your pain and suffering, and then laughs about it with his other colleagues.
Wow, only a few. Let's see. It's gonna be Cooley. It's Crowder. I know knows the pain. He knows the pain. Yeah. My wife knows the pain. That's a short list, but here's the thing. If you don't have, that's the other thing. If you don't have someone who can really talk to about it, it's going to destroy you. So you got to have these.
I'll tell you, your mama, your wife, your girlfriend, or your husband, they don't want to hear that shit. They get tired of it, right? So you're on an island, my friend, and you better have a lawyer who could be on that island with you and fund your little yacht, keep afloat.
First of all, if you bring up my mom, I'm going to bring up your mom. Let's just don't even go there. Second of all, it is like being on that, but this is the point. People think that the right prevails. Hard work makes you wealthy, and the right always prevails, and good people.
It very seldom prevails
at all. So you got to have all these elements combining to make a successful prosecution. Let's list up again for the people who don't know what you need. First of all, you need to have a lawyer that is at the right level, right place in their career, right knowledge of the law. Not somebody who's just doing it you a favor as a friend. That doesn't work, right? That's the first thing.
No, it never works. No, because that lawyer's going to invest a lot of time, money, and effort, and over the course of several years, generally.
Yeah, that's right.
And they're going to be going against a dozen law firms, lawyers, government agencies that have nothing but money. They got a black hole filled with $100 bills. Listen. The government will spend $10 million defending a case they know they're wrong in, so not to give you $5 million.
That's right.
They'll do it every time.
And explain why that is, Paul. Whose money are they using?
Well, they're using taxpayer money, taxpayer funded. It doesn't cost them personally anything. And their pals who have left government service and now in private practice are defending them at the rate of $400, $500, $600, $700, $800 an hour.
I know. So it's a really interesting. That's another really interesting part of the justice system is that if you sue a government agent, they will be able to use their public money to hire a really high profile attorney to defend themselves against you.
Yes. And they will spend literally millions to prevent you or your lawyer from collecting a dollar,
or from even having discovery.
Right. Well, it starts with we're going to block, we're going to delay, we're going to hide, we're going to cheat at every opportunity.
That's right.
Every opportunity.
So with these impediments in place, it's almost unfathomable that you could have a case that successfully runs this gauntlet, this Rubicon of legal and personal and financial barriers, right?
Right.
So to be able to do that is very rare.
We hear about these big number cases where somebody got $20 million or $30 million, okay?
Yeah, right.
We hear about them because they are so rare. That's right. Generally, 95% of all cases are settled prior to a trial or jury or judge getting involved in a verdict.
If everybody is behaving honestly, I think that's the way it should be resolved. Don't you? I mean, it should be done that way.
Well, what they'll do is they'll money whip you to the point where the lawyer's got no money, you have no money, and they'll come in with some stupid, silly figure, and you'll take it because you want to be done with it.
Yeah, and again, it's that emotional component that people forget. We're not robots. We're human beings.
Right. I've seen guys who were in jail for 30 years, wrongfully convicted, take $500,000 because they wanted it done.
They want out, and they want their life. And they're you can't buy time. You got to get out.
You can't get the time back. That's why you would get a big number. But they knew a jury would give him a big number. But he was older and did not have the time or inclination to wait another 5 or 6 years. And maybe.
So the inability of law enforcement to be held accountable in the way that they should, in my opinion, and this is where we're going with this, has prevented serious reform. In fact, it has emboldened the many bad actors that are in law enforcement, and has also harmed the profession because it keeps people who are, ethical, competent, good, and good
right. And listen, and we know officers who this stuff makes them sick. Yep. And they know these guys are getting away with murder, and they know these dudes are held to a different standard and say, oh, I don't know them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So they're watching a bad actor get away with one bad act after another. They're going out and doing a good job for 8 hours a day.
Right.
And they're getting terrorized over maybe a speeding ticket that got questioned by a powerful member of the community.
And this brings us back to the next issue that you're thinking about right now, I can tell. And that is that society gets very angry with bad law enforcement, as they should. But there's an equal amount of hostility and anxiety towards officers who say nothing while they're seeing all this stuff going on. And that's something that I think is really interesting. I don't think people realize the extent to which good officers can be harassed, harangued, and
listen, they're not going to do it
if they speak up.
A good officer is going to mind their own business, turn a blind eye to it, and shut their mouth, because if they come forward, their career and life as they knew it is ruined. They will be frozen out socially, professionally, economically. They'll come after them.
Such a great way to put it. And then, of course, that affects mentally. That's their mental state. That's their identity. Their identity is stripped away.
Right? Listen, I have a young officer right now who has knowledge of a homicide that was committed by another officer, and he spoke up, and he was immediately ostracized by his department, by all his colleagues. This guy was a rock star in his department. Well thought of, liked, aggressive, smart, honest, hardworking, right? Did everything you're supposed to do in a job. And now no one speaks to him, and they terrorize him, and they're trying to do things to make him quit.
And that's what happens to good officers. This is why.
And this is his reward for beefing a cop who's not even on his department, but was on a neighboring department.
Well, and that's why I don't care for people making the argument that, well, if there was all these bad officers, all these bad things going on, people would speak up. No, they wouldn't.
No, they don't speak up, because you get your career ruined if you dare to speak against a fellow officer, regardless of the fact if they're right or wrong or doing something illegal or improper.
Well, let me ask you about this, because this is a fun subject that you and I have not really talked about, but I'd like to talk about with you because you're one of the smarter people that I know. Well, at least one of the more experienced people I know. This is an issue of the ability, when you're talking to somebody, their ability to tell you the truth. One of the things that you and I have that we share is that we view each other as equals. I don't think I'm better than you. You don't think you're better than me. We've known each other a long time. We've seen each other when we're bitchy. We've seen each other when we're happy. We've been drunk together. We've been all these things together. We know each other pretty well. And I like it when you tell me the truth about what's going on, and you like it when I tell you the truth about what's going on. And that's the value of our relationship. How many relationships do you know that people have that are like that, where you can do that without conflict?
Well, there's not many, and people are, far too sensitive. They don't want to hear anything bad from their friends or family members, or especially their professional colleagues, right? So it requires a special person to be able to take criticism without taking it personally.
Without getting butthurt real fast.
Right, and cops are the most sensitive bastards I've ever been around, right? They don't want to hear it.
Cops and military, man. What's with the military?
Their buddy, their partner, their boss, or anyone else. Listen, I'll give you an example. A friend of mine just sat for the sergeant's test in Chicago the other day.
Okay.
There was 2,000 guys taking the sergeant's test.
Yeah.
His first thought when he walked in the room was he recognized about 30 idiots who, not in any imagination or scenario he could think of, he'd like to see them being a sergeant.
Of course.
In fact, he thought they should be fired and gone off the job. Now they're potentially going to be sergeants supervising 10 to 15 other cops every night, right? So
fuck up and move up.
His first thought was, wow, there's a lot of qualified guys in here. I don't know if I'm going to get this job. Right. No, his first thought was, man, there are a lot of idiots in here taking this test. You better hope none will get promoted.
Yeah, that's totally true.
Right, that's his first thought.
Yeah.
This is a very bright, intuitive police officer.
Yep.
And I can tell you for a fact, he waved, nodded at everybody, kept his mouth shut, and minded his own business.
That's right. But when you're talking to people, whether they're law enforcement or whether they're friends, family, whatever, it doesn't, just because they're agreeing. My wife tells me this all the time. Just because someone's agreeing with you does not mean that they agree with you. They can just
might be agreeing with you just for the sake of argument, or they don't want to talk about it, or they just think you're an idiot and they don't have time for
it. And they don't think you're worth talking to.
Right. And your wife is right, because a lot of people will nod and say yes, yes, and then do something completely different.
No, and absolutely true. And so I'm just curious your take on that, because it's, for me, I've become better about being aware of the fact that when I have a power differential, when there's a power differential between me and the person I'm talking to, they're not always capable of telling me bad news. So
or they don't know you well enough that they're afraid what your reaction might be.
If they disagree with me, right?
Right. We see this all the time. Now we're a little bit older and been around a long time. Yeah. How did you used to hate when you were young in this business? And all the old timers were talking. Whenever I hear a sentence start off with, well, 20 years ago.
Yeah. Fucking hate
that shit used to make my head spin when I was on the receiving end of it.
Yeah.
I have to force myself not to say that in conversation.
I do it I'm always suppressing it. And if I say it, I immediately take it back.
Because that was the last thing I wanted to hear when I was younger. Because my first thought was, you know what, you old bastard, it's time for you to go. Get out of my way. Right? And I think that's how most young people respond to that statement.
And so I want to say this, rightly so. Rightly so.
Well, in most cases, rightly so, because most of the times I found assholes making that statement who didn't know what they were talking about and would use the crutch of, I've been doing this a long time.
Yeah.
So trust me, I'm right.
Yeah, that's
I've seen it all, right?
Yeah, your experience really means nothing to me in terms of it used to be this way or I did it this way. Well, if you're doing it right, great. If you're doing it right for 1 year, you're fantastic. If you've been doing it wrong for 20 years, you're a moron. Doesn't matter.
Well, right. And how many times have we seen this where, well, I've been doing homicide investigations for 20 years. Well, guess what? You've been fucking them up for 20 years too, dude. Okay?
And nobody's
you're now better at it now than you were 20 years ago. So don't brag about your experience because you suck.
And not only that, you got no real friends in your life because no one's told you that you suck until now.
This is true because we find out what the old cases were and we talk to people and your reputation precedes you.
I totally agree.
I just want to your reputation is well documented.
That's right. Everybody knows. Trust me. And that's the thing I find it most intriguing is the inability of people to be honest with each other. That's how we get into these legal entanglements where you have officers who have been hanging around with either the wrong people or getting the wrong leadership advice. And nobody's telling them no. Nobody's telling them stop. They're being hired and encouraged in the wrong direction. And they wind up doing stuff they shouldn't be doing because they don't know any better. And so when I see a failure of some officer doing something they shouldn't do, I see that as not only a failure of the officer, I see it as a failure of every single training officer and every single supervisor and every colleague they have for not holding them accountable. That's how I see it.
Right. Well, and police agencies are supposed to be fail-safes, i.e. everybody's got a supervisor that signs off on it, right? At some point, somebody should have recognized there was a problem in this case, right? But yeah, we all know the reality of the situation is maybe a first-line supervisor will usually only check their work for, is this going to get through the prosecutor and in court?
That's right.
Not so much anything else. They might go, well, I'm not signing this report because I know that, for instance, what you're saying is absolute bullshit. It's not what happened. So go back and rewrite this thing.
That's what they should. They should have the red pen. The red pen should be.
But we'll never know that conversation took place, will we? Because we will get the latest and greatest report, not the first copy or the first draft.
You are being so optimistic. What I think is, I don't think that most supervisors in law enforcement have the capability of correcting the people that they supervise. I think most supervisors don't actually know the job of their subordinates.
I think for instance, you could be a street sergeant or a patrolman. You get promoted to sergeant, you might be promoted in the homicide division. All of a sudden, you're supervising 10 homicide investigators.
And you don't know anything about homicide, so you're just taking their word, but they're doing the right thing.
And they're going, hey, Sarge, trust me, that's how we do it up here, okay? Just sign the damn report and shut up.
That's right.
And you're a new sergeant. You want to make waves. You don't want to be known as a troublemaker. You sign the report and shut up.
Right.
You bring the sergeant in on the witness stand and go, Sergeant, you sign this report. Yep. Well, what do you know about this case? Well, I know what my investigator told me or what's in the report.
What's interesting to me is, and I'm going through this right now in about 3 different cases where we're doing depositions in relating to law enforcement personnel, whether it's forensic personnel, investigative personnel at different levels. And what I'm finding is it is so fractured right now that there is no lead investigators. Nobody's going to crime scenes. No interagencies are talking to each other. And they're all just kind of doing their little part. And who's putting it together is a prosecutor. And the prosecutor may not have any of the discovery because they're not getting all the material. So there's a legal requirement to do things, but nobody's actually putting the whole case together and no one's talking because everybody only knows their one little part. They all stay in their own little lane. And it forces people without resources to make plea deals to avoid going for longer prison sentences. But anyone with actual resources can fight this and expose it. And that's what it takes. And it does not, but you have to, again, have the right lawyer. And that's why
exactly what it takes. But to fight it, it takes a superhuman effort. We touched briefly on it, but the fact is, to fight one of these things requires hundreds of thousands of dollars and a team of experts and a team of people who are willing to fight the fight for you.
That's right. I probably get contacted. I know this happens to you, and I'm curious about your experience. I don't know it. I've only heard tangentially. My experience is, I would say about 3 times a week, I get contacted by somebody who wants me to take up their case for free.
Well, yeah, I get jail mail. All right, I get letters from all over the country from convicted inmates. Well, I have a book that's probably in every prison in the United States, talking about fighting the wrongful conviction. Right. So that generates mail from all over the country.
Yep.
Frankly, from all over the world, because you have these, women in Norway who are in love with some mope on death row in Mississippi, and they're writing letters on their behalf.
That's the worst. Oh my God.
I get a lot of that. And the fact is, at this point, even if they have some merit, and they get to the point where you have a conversation with them, the first 5 minutes, I'm going, how are you going to fund this?
So, well, I feel really bad about a conversation I had recently. I'd like to get it off my chest. Can you be my therapist for just 1 second?
Sure.
All right, you're my friend, so don't hurt me too much.
You know I am.
But if you gotta hurt me, I'd rather it be you.
Okay.
So there's a case that I worked on a long time ago, about 20 years ago. It involves a double homicide of a teenage girl, involving a teenage girl. And there was a sexual assault of this girl. And I was working with the sheriff's department when it happened. And then there was a change of guard. A new sheriff got elected, much more corrupt. He fired everybody in the agency, all right, including the guy that I was working with internal affairs. The person that was responsible for this homicide, the series of homicides, was very likely one of the detectives working in the department. And they canceled all investigations against this guy because he was friends with the new sheriff. Long story short, obviously I have no role. I'm done with it. I back away because that's how it works. I don't get to, if I have no client, I don't work the case. You know what I mean?
You call it minding your own business.
Yeah, I call it doing my job, and my job is contingent on having an employer. So, in that case, or a client in that case. So 20 years advance, and I start getting rumblings from one of the retired sheriff's guys from that agency and the family members that there's something going on, and they'd like to talk to me, and they just found a report that I had done back in the day. And I get contacted by somebody who's a little coy about who they are and what their relationship is. And every time I get contacted by somebody in one of these cases, I'm like, who are you? What's your real name? What's your role in this case? What's your connection to it? Is there an attorney? Do you represent the family? And usually if they don't tick one of those boxes, I don't want to talk to them. But long story short, yeah, exactly. So long story short, I had a very brief conversation with this young lady. I probably shouldn't have had the conversation. I should have just had it on email, but I felt like a responsibility to have it in person because I'm not a dick. I sound like it. I'm not a dick, but I sound like one because I'm being curt. And my point is,
I could send a picture.
Yeah, I know you can. Please don't. Please do not. I know that you can. Please don't. Like immediately, like a recent one. So,
right.
So I basically said, look, you're coming to me without a client. You're coming to me without any connection to the family. You're coming to me without any attorney. You're coming to me without any direction. And you yourself are just a student who's interested in the case. And while all these things sound good and look good on television, it may seem like something that you can do. You can't. You don't have it. It's not only this. If you want to get from point A to point B, there has to be some mechanism for doing that. You got to walk, drive, or fly, right?
Right.
You walk, drive, or fly. What are you going to do? You don't even have an idea of what point B is yet. You don't even know where you're going. And I can't be that person for you. And that's the thing that's most disheartening, I think, for people who are in this situation, is they need to understand what the next step is for them, and they don't have anybody to do that. I don't know if I should have talked to her. I don't know if I've been so blunt, but because I don't want her to feel like you shouldn't be doing anything. You shouldn't be trying anything. I want her to feel like, okay, you need to come up with a fucking plan, right? Don't treat it like it's a little fucking hobby where you're going to get some podcast and you're going to, get some followers and whatever. I don't want that. What I want is I care about the outcome. So do you know what winning looks like? Do you know what success looks like? Do you have the ability to see this thing through? Or are you just going to get involved, create some noise, and cause a lot of pain and hope that goes nowhere? Tell me how you respond to stuff like that, or do you respond at all?
Well, I generally do not respond to it unless they're very, very insistent. And sometimes just curiosity will get the best of me.
Yeah.
And I'll have a conversation. But I'm able, after all these years, to cut to the chase quickly.
Me too. Yeah, exactly.
And I don't have any problem telling somebody, listen, you don't have the funds and or the personnel to attack this thing. And I'll always leave them with, call the Innocence Project in your jurisdiction, who covers your state or your county or whomever.
Right.
And they like cases like this. If they find merit, they'll take it on. I, unfortunately, cannot due to financial restraints and or the client load, right?
Right.
So I'm always willing to talk to somebody, if nothing else, to give them some good advice.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you give them advice they don't want to hear, but it's the best advice you could give them.
Yeah,
Listen,
that's the thing. They have to be ready to hear the advice, and they're not always ready to hear it.
Right, and you're right. A lot of people get real heated up and real fired up, want to do something until it gets hard.
And by the way, I think you've been that guy. I've been that guy too, where I get all heated up and fired up, and not everyone.
Oh yeah, and we do.
You learn to regulate that.
We run out of funds, money, clients, or we find out somebody was lying, horribly lying to us, and we catch them, and we're done with the case.
Yeah, I just assume. I start out assuming everyone's lying to me. I want paper. If I don't got paper or recordings, I don't want to talk about it.
No, I'm still a chump, I guess, because
you are.
Got a good line of bullshit. I'll believe you for a little while.
You came from a different time than me. For me, it was always evidence. Evidence was always first. And
I'm Irish. I love a good story.
Yeah, you do.
When we get a good story, you can make some hay with me. That's or if you're attractive.
Right? Like me.
Yeah, right. Or if you're smart. If you're smart, you're intelligent, you're going to get some of my time.
Well, that's the other thing is a lot of people. I want to talk about that for just a little bit because I think this is an important adjunct to that. The way the justice system is stilted, people who are attractive get more attention because there's better imagery associated with them, and it plays better on the news and the television, right?
Right.
And that's unfair, but it's a reality.
It's not right, okay? We know it's not right, but it is a reality. Pretty people have a dick in this life, okay? If you're a good-looking dude or dudette, let's face it, the first 30 or 40 years on this earth, your ass is in butter for the most part.
And ugly guys like me, I got to work. I got to work hard.
Yes, you do. Excuse me for a minute. Ugly people, fat people, unattractive people, obnoxious people, they got to work twice as hard as pretty. Okay?
Quit listing off my attributes.
Most of our attributes, for that matter. Okay. Listen, even jurors love a hot model testifying, as opposed to the 300-pound up man.
Well, I worked a lot of sexual assault cases in San Diego County, and what the DA would do, DA would only hire very tall, thin, leggy, blonde interns. So whenever there was a rape case, they would send those interns over to sit with the victim. So that's who was sitting with the victim when the jury was deliberating or when the jury was hearing evidence.
And it's a good policy because people love pretty people, right?
They love to protect pretty people. That's the other problem.
Yes, they damsels in distress, right? We're all about that.
Apparently. Apparently. Yeah. And I want to say, I really appreciate that, but I want to get back to the honesty issue. One of the biggest problems we have is that we are unable to accept that people will not tell us the truth. And you have to have a mechanism by which you can screen that. And I have found that, again, the evidence is the only way to do that. I listen to the story, but I have to accept that because of my position and because of who I am, that people will not tell me the truth all the time.
Listen,
because of what they think.
I like to say this: physical evidence never lies. Okay,
mm-hmm.
So the story has to at least match what we know to be factual. Okay, and that's a good starting point. Well, how often do we get involved in cases there is no physical evidence, or very low?
Worse than that, you have a state-sponsored expert who is coming in and saying some bullshit that doesn't actually match up with the evidence. I had a case in San Diego again involving a police officer who ran down a suspect in a domestic violence case who was unarmed. He handcuffed him. Then after he handcuffed him, he shot him.
I remember this case.
In the back of the head, yeah. So what's interesting about this case is that I was involved in the civil aspect of it. The family was suing the police agency, and the state hired a very well-known, very smart, what I would consider to be a Cadillac level shooting incident reconstruction guy named Lucian Haig. Lucian Haig trains law enforcement all over the country in shooting incident. Right. He wrote a book on shooting incident reconstruction. And I worship this guy's work because I thought he's one of the greatest forensic scientists. I'm so proud to know him, and I know him through Jerry Chisholm, and he's such a great guy and so honest. And he's got such great methodology in his book. His book is fucking solid, man. I would recommend that book even to this day to anybody, especially to Lucian Haig, because when it comes to what he did was when he worked the case, he refused to write diagrams. He refused to do a drawing. He refused to do a trajectory analysis. He refused to explain what everything meant. He hid everything inside of jargon. And the reason why is because the only reconstruction of the crime was you have the guy on his knees getting shot in the back of the head by the police officer while handcuffed. There's no other way to describe it. So what he
in a parking lot, as I recall, in broad daylight.
That's right, in a parking lot outside of a bunch of apartments with a bunch of witnesses watching him do it.
Yes.
Now, the forensic guy, in his book, he talks about the need to write a diagram, the need to put a diagram, the need to do measurements, the need to show everything, to make it clear what exactly happened. He refused to do it during the deposition. He wouldn't do a diagram. They wouldn't draw it, a simple trajectory. Just show the position of the victim to the shooter. What's the superior, inferior? And he just wouldn't do it. And they're like, can you just, well, if you can't draw it, he goes, well, my hands are arthritic. I can't really do it. Oh, well, then just show us. He goes, I don't feel like getting up. I don't feel like getting up and showing you. So you're not going to show us. No, it was 45 minutes of this bullshit of him not being willing to actually explain what his findings were because it was so bad for the police that it would make them look monstrous if he did it. And that's the thing I find the most disheartening when you have forensic personnel who know the evidence, who have the evidence, and refuse to put it on the record because it makes their client look bad. That I find that's the biggest problem. Tell me, respond to that a little bit, because
here's my response. He shouldn't have took the case. He knows as well as we're sitting here talking right now, it was a bad shooting, no excuse for it, and he can't justify the officer's actions in that particular case.
I watched his testimony.
He took the money.
He's like, I never heard of Brent Turvey. I don't know who this person is. I don't know this. I don't know that. I'm like, what the fuck?
He took the big fee.
Yeah, he did.
He wants the police to keep hiring him in these shootings.
And to do training. He does training with the police. And his son does training as well. His son's also.
He's not going to lose that source of income.
No.
He should have just said, the smart move would have been, fellas, you don't want me testifying in this case.
Yeah.
Call this guy, call this woman, okay? But don't call me.
Right.
And you're covered because now the defense can't call me because I've talked to you guys.
I know.
So it's all good. That's what he should have done. That's the smart move.
Yeah.
The dumb move was marrying himself up to this horrible case, because now it's going to come back to haunt him in every other case he testifies.
Oh, man. Motherfucker, I'm putting it in 3rd edition of Crime Reconstruction. Don't even think for a second I'm not.
There you go.
I have no compunction about doing that. I have a very few friends in this industry, and this is why. So
tough to fight a transcript.
No, it's impossible. I have the transcripts. It's terrible.
Right. Yeah, it's tough to fight it.
Well, and that's the other thing is I want to leave with this. The biggest problem that I see in holding police agencies accountable is not necessarily the law. It's that not enough attorneys know the administrative procedures associated with filing this kind of lawsuit and the kind of discovery you need and how to do it and what to ask for. You almost have to be an expert yourself in law enforcement to be able to file the suit competently.
You do, and you know what? We see it time and time again. A lot, they run out of time, they run out of effort, they're too busy, they got too many other trials going on, and it's just something they missed. And by the time they remember it, well, maybe discovery's been shut down, right?
It's not just about the being right. That's my point. So you have to be right, but then you have to sue the right party. Right. You have to survive the first round of summary judgment. You have to then be able to get discovery material from the other side. You can't just have it based on your idea. You got to get the discovery to find out what people are really saying, and then you have to have somebody competent going through that discovery and understanding what laws were broken. Because even law enforcement officers who have been wronged, who are filing lawsuits against their agencies, they never think in terms. They think in terms of the emotional. I was hurt. This hurt me and my identity. Right. They don't think in terms of the laws that were broken or the rules that were violated, and that's the discipline, right?
Exactly. And you have to be disciplined when you work these cases, and you have to be experienced, and you have to be willing to find the experts that have worked them, continue to work them, and they know everything you need to do to win.
Yeah.
And
not just winning looks different to everybody, but let's put it this way. There are levels of winning. The first round is maybe the charges get reduced. Maybe there's a plea that can be made. Maybe something. That's the first thing. Second thing is maybe there's a compromise that can be reached. All right, and maybe there's some admissions that can be made. But it isn't always about publicly pummeling somebody. Maybe it's about inducing some reform. Maybe it's about, like when I've filed lawsuits in the past where it's just about getting access to a single document that they wouldn't give. That's a very common thing. So
of course, what do we see? We see this in freedom of information requests all the time when you have to file a lawsuit in order to get the information that should have been public and given to you anyways, right?
That's right. And then the judge has to force them to do their job and to follow the law. And that's the other thing. Law enforcement agencies,
they're not going to do it on their own.
They do not. They're just like anybody else. They don't follow the law unless they're compelled to.
Unless they're forced or compelled to, right?
That's right.
I read about a case today where this kid got arrested on a murder.
Yep.
And the phone data information basically showed, his phone was in these places where the homicide occurred. But guess what? Someone else was driving his car. His phone was in it, and they didn't want to hear it. When the cops grabbed him, they said, "We don't need you to talk. We don't need a statement from you. We got you.
Yeah,
we got you within 47 feet of the homicide that night."
Yeah, come on.
Well, the police on their own figured out it was his mother's boyfriend who was driving his car.
Yeah.
And using his phone. He didn't know that. But the cops on their own came to him and said, you know what? We made a mistake. And they opened the jail door and let him out without some public defender or private attorney doing it. But how often do we see that? That's rare. That happens.
I got to give a lot of credibility to an agency that can do that.
Right. And I think it was Tucson, actually. Tucson Police Department.
That's real good.
One of the Arizona bigger cities did it.
That's real good.
Generally, in my experience, they double down and go, "Yeah, you did it for sure, asshole." So it's usually us that figure out the former mom's boyfriend did it, right?
Sounds like a lawyer problem.
Yes. So these things do not happen very often. They're very rare. Self-correcting mode.
Yep, exactly right. Well, I don't want to keep you too much time. I just wanted to say I really appreciate you talking with me about this today, because it's one of those issues that I think people believe there's this always going to be justice. It's always going to be meted out the right way, and the people are going to.
Well, that's fairy tale TV. You want to always see justice turn on cops, okay? Because you're not going to see it in real life.
Even one of my favorite shows of all time, I think it's one of yours as well, is the old classic Law and Orders, not the new ones, not the ones from the last 10 years or 15 years, but back in the 90s when they used to do them. Those Law and Orders were good. They were a little jaded, and they actually taught you about the law. And what they taught you all the time was, people, sometimes justice prevails, but sometimes not. And even if it does prevail, even when you win, you lose sometimes. And that's how
pretty even-handed back in the old days, right?
I know.
Probably when they had some intellectuals writing scripts. Now they're just pumping them out as fast as they can pump them out.
What they're doing is they're just copying what's happening in the press, and they're doing it unintelligently. Back in the day when
they put a little spin on it and they do it in 45 minutes or less.
I know, I hate that so much. I wish we could go back. We can't. Anyway, it doesn't matter. What matters is the fantasy has to give way to reality, and the reality is that you have to have professionals working these kinds of cases. It can't be personalities. You have to have people who are properly motivated, properly educated, properly trained. And when you just because you feel like you've been hurt does not mean that you understand the law or how to hold people accountable. And just because you hire a lawyer doesn't mean that lawyer knows how to hold the agency accountable. You got to have the right people, and you got to.
It's very rare to plug all the right holes and move forward in a cohesive and proper manner. If you don't know what you're doing, the chances of you being able to accomplish that are slim.
Well, and not only that, working with people that know, understanding when you're working with people who don't know what they're doing. One of the reasons even though you and I don't agree on everything, I enjoy working with you on different cases mainly because I know that you know what you're doing. You know what I mean? I know.
Well, we have a different perspective a lot, and we get a little biased in cases we're working on, and it's good to bounce things off each other because we're going to get the truth from each other, right?
Eventually.
Right. I mean, even if we don't want to hear it, we're going to get the truth.
Yeah.
And so you got to have someone who's going to tell you the truth. If you just got a bunch of people around you that are going to tell you what you want to hear, to shut you up or make you be quiet, right? Yeah, honey, you're right. Yeah, you're so smart. Oh my God, I wish I was that smart. Yeah, well, when you're hearing that, better find a new friend or honey, okay? Not hearing that at my house, okay?
God, I know. You have to use each other to get the rough edges off so that when you're actually standing up there making a statement, it actually has been vetted. It actually contains the evidence and the truth. But what I find is too often you have attorneys who are personalities who are pushing things, man, that they don't know what they're doing. You have people with families who've suffered terrible losses trying to hold people accountable, or law enforcement professionals who've suffered terrible losses trying to hold their agency responsible.
Right.
They are relying on their friends to take care of them instead of hiring professionals, instead of getting people involved who've done it before. And it's a tragedy. I wish that there was some kind of situation where people could only take cases if they'd worked them before, if they had some sort of, certification or some sort of, that they were actually specialized in that. But unfortunately, that's not the way the law works, and that's not the way it works at all. But you can't change what it is. A lawyer can take just about any kind of case.
All right, well, we've been banging this around for about an hour and 15 minutes for free, okay? So we just gave several $100 worth of free advice to people.
I hope. Any parting thoughts on this? My parting thought is obviously get the right people involved. Make sure that they know what damage has actually occurred. And don't let your emotions run everything. Hire people who are going to keep your emotions from running the show, because your emotions will screw you before anything else.
You really have to get somebody who's not emotionally involved to look at it for you, okay? Because your emotions are the last thing you can depend on in these cases.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely right. Well, Paul, what are you going to do for the rest of the day? I got a bunch of other stuff, a bunch of other work I got to do, and I got
a lot of work to do as well. And it's 4:30 here, so right now I got to get me some iced tea. But other than that, I just got to catch up on all these phone calls and emails now.
Well, you're welcome for the break.
yeah. Thanks for the break. Okay.
Hey, Paul, I'll talk to you later. Right? Have a good day.
All right, my friend. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.